Hey, today I'm going to be doing another review on One Piece, and this time we are reviewing Thriller Bark. So after Water 7, my expectations were pretty high going into this, so I did not want to be disappointed, and definitely was not. Although this arc's writing and character development isn't the greatest, it was as much needed a change of pace, and it brought something completely different to the table, and I'm going to talk about all that in this video. But before we get into it, I want to say thanks for all that you guys have done for me up until now. I just recently reached 100 subscribers, so I really appreciate all of you for watching, and with that being said, let's get right into it. So at first, Luffy and his crew end up running into an abandoned ship with no one on except Brook, a living skeleton. He told the crew that he couldn't step into the sun because his shadows was taken away, so he would just burn in the sun. He also told the crew that he ate a fruit that revives people from the dead, so that explains why he was a skeleton, because he originally died. He briefly goes over his backstory, which is also pretty sad, but he goes more in depth on that a little later on, so I'll get into that a little later when he goes more in depth onto that. But then Luffy decides to help him get his shadows back, so they make their way to Thriller Bark, which is basically like this big ship. It's like so massive that it could be mistaken as an island. I thought that was also pretty cool. Everything that happens here on out gets pretty hectic, with there being zombies and weird creatures that are stitched together and brought to life. It's pretty crazy. The first thing I want to talk about is the doctor that Chopper really looked up to, and that was Dr. Hogback. According to Chopper, he was one of the best known doctors that suddenly vanished, but it turns out that he was evil, ended up being kind of an ass, but nonetheless, he was kind of cool. He was actually assisting Gecko Moria, one of the warlords of the sea that pretty much took over Thriller Bark and basically just became the tyrant. But I'll get into Gecko Moria a bit later, because he plays a big part of the story, obviously being one of the 7 warlords of the sea. But at first, Luffy and his crew were more confused than anything, because the place seemed pretty scary, but it wasn't like they were in like serious danger or anything. This made me invested because of all the mystery surrounding Thriller Bark, and all the questions I had that were going to be answered at a later time. As the crew learned more secrets about the place, like how there are people wandering around that should be dead, the more they realized that this place is actually more evil than they initially thought. We also get introduced to some strange figures like Absalom, who just wants a bride and nothing else, and he could also become invisible, which is a cool addition. And then there's Ghost Princess Perona, who apparently commands an army of wild zombies and can make anyone extremely depressed with their ghosts. Yeah, it was pretty weird. These guys have some pretty interesting abilities. These characters weren't all too interesting, but they did make the fights interesting because of their personalities and their matchups. I'm not going to get into the details too much about what happened, because I'm not trying to summarize everything that happened. But after the crew separated and Luffy got captured, Brook clears up some of the questions I had, and he starts talking about Gecko Moria's powers of the shadow fruit, and how he can take people's shadows and how he can put those shadows into dead creatures like the ones that Dr. Hogback is creating and making alive. This was really surprising to me, and it was honestly cool as hell. I think that Gecko Moria looks pretty goofy, but his powers are really interesting, especially with Dr. Hogback on his side. We then figure out that Brook's shadows is inside a master swordsman that, of course, Zolo is going to face at a later time. We also get to see some pretty cool fight scenes, the most memorable being Usopp's fight against Perona. A lot of you in the comments from my Water 7 review were all explaining to me how Usopp was a better character, and you guys definitely made me feel better about him. And with this fight, it made me even like him even more. Perona had this ability to make anyone depressed, and we saw it work on a lot of Strats, even Luffy, but it never worked on Usopp because he's already a pessimist. I literally laughed out loud at this part. It was really funny. The fight was also pretty cool, and of course, Usopp came on top. There was also a funny matchup with Sanji and Absalom, because Sanji was trying to save Nambi while Absalom was trying to marry her, which is also pretty funny, especially because of how Sanji is about, that kind of stuff. But before I get into the last part of the arc, I also want to talk about the second warlord of the sea that appears. And this was probably the most unexpected thing to happen. Nami encounters him first, and his appearance just made everything seem more intense than it already was. But he actually makes an impact towards the end, so I'll get into that a little later. While Thriller Bark, most of the Straw Hats actually got their shadows taken away, which made everything just way more intense because of the threat of day. Next, we get introduced to Dr. Hogback's ultimate creation, and that was Oars, which is the vessel of Luffy's shadow. This is something I also was not expecting at all, and it was a massive surprise. Gecko Moria actually surprisingly succeeds into putting Luffy's shadow into Oars. We get pretty much a massive version of Luffy, which was pretty funny to see. Oars had the same personality as Luffy due to the fact that it is his shadow that was used, but over time it started to become more loyal to Gecko Moria, which is kind of like what happens when Gecko Moria uses the shadow. Over time, it kind of just starts obeying him more and more. And with that, everyone joins the fight. And with Oars going completely berserk, everyone joins the fight while Luffy was taken away by some friendly zombies to get powered up. This fight was honestly so epic. This is the first time we really get to see all the Straw Hats go at it at the same time, other than Luffy, of course. Because usually they are broken off into groups or something like that. And it was really cool to see. While they were fighting, Luffy was getting shadows put into him so that he could become stronger. Because every time they put a shadow into Luffy, he basically just got powered up. He got all those powers that those shadows have. So they put some pretty powerful people into Luffy. And with that, he got stronger, and he ended up being so overpowered than he already was. So of course, Luffy gets back and beats the crap out of Gecko Moria and Oars. I think it should have been over at this moment, but then Gecko Moria took in more shadows and became so huge and big that it worked against him. and that's when everyone gets saved and all the shadows go back to the original owners. This actual addition was kind of weird to me because the fight just kept going and going, and it kind of felt pointless for it to keep going. But that's just a small criticism that I had. Nothing, it didn't really change much. At the very end, that warlord that Nami found, Kuma, appears, and he says that he is ordered to kill Luffy and everyone. But Zolo stepped up, and instead of doing that, Zolo took in all the pain and suffering that Luffy went through during the fight. That was very impactful because it just shows how tight everyone is and how all the Straw Hats rely on each other and how they all trust each other. But honestly, with all that, Zolo should have died because he was already at the brink of death from the fight before. But I wasn't too mad because they all cheated death already multiple times. Also, to add on to Kuma, I think Kuma is such a cool character. We learned that he is actually kind of like a test or something that I forgot who, but he was basically created by the government, and he kind of sees development over time, how he kind of is trying to get his humanity or whatever. So I thought that was pretty cool. Hopefully we get to see more of him later. But let's just move on. So at the end, we get Brook's backstory, which is honestly very sad and made me feel really depressed due to the fact that everyone he cared about on the ship died, and he was the last one left for many, many years. The scene where Brook's crewmates were all having drinks and singing songs was very sad because they all knew they were going to die soon, but they were all happy and kept the party going. It made me feel really bad about him, but it also made me feel really happy because of how he found another crew to join, and that's the Straw Hat. We also learned that while Laboon from like ages ago is actually the whale that is waiting for Brook's crew, which is pretty cool as well to see how that all connects. We saw Laboon like a long time ago, and like right before they even got to the Grand Line, which is honestly it kind of blew my mind how that all like comes together. But to wrap things up, this arc overall did a great job about bringing something new into the world of One Piece, and it was very interesting and pretty innovative. But despite that, the antagonists didn't really feel that fleshed out. They were all just pure evil and really nothing else. But the cool fight scenes and all the emotional moments definitely made up for it. And what came out of it was a well done story and arc. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys didn't see my last video, which was a Water 7 review, make sure you guys go check that out as well. That's in the description below. But with that being said, see you guys next video. Peace.